today we're going to talk about crop insurance and grain marketing. And in particular here, as I share my screen, we're going to talk about SCO, SCO, ECO, and let me flip that around. SCO, ECO, and hedging, and then putting both of these things together. As usual, I think, Jessica, you'll keep an eye on the chat. So if you have questions as we go through, Jessica will keep an eye on that when I'm presenting, and I'll keep an eye on it when she's presenting. And then we'll open up for discussion here towards the end. So with that, let's jump right into what we're after today. So a little bit already about this. I'm not going to conceptualize the decision environment. I actually got rid of that a little bit, but I'll talk about that in the essence of each one of these options: the supplemental coverage option, otherwise known as SCO, and enhanced coverage option, the ECO, and then we'll describe pre-harvest marketing and motivate it, and then we'll discuss linkages between both. Both SCO and ECO are relatively new policies. ECO came out in 2021. SCO came out in 2015. It's a county level policy where it uses county yields. Remember, your farm uses your APH yields, but price is the same. And for corn right now, as of this morning, our projected price was sitting around $4.72, and our soybean price was sitting around $10.57. To incentivize participation, the government does provide a premium subsidy to lower the cost, the out of wallet cost, of 65% for ECO and 65% for SCO. Let's talk about the coverage on SCO and ECO. For ECO, you're going to get the band from 86% to 90% or 95%. So up to 9 percentage points there. You go from 86 up to 95. And on SCO, that'll take you up from wherever your individual coverage is up to 86. Now, the liability inside of each one will be different by farm. And that's because you're running off of the APH on the farm, the percent of your yields. So higher APHs imply you have more coverage. Got an example here of for ECO, where you have the 9% from 86 up to 95. If you're running off of an APH of 100, then that's 9 bushels. And if you have an APH of 120, that's 10.8 bushels. And I have a graph over here kind of showing, not a graph, but a figure showing where kind of how this thing works and where they stack onto. But that's not entirely what's happening, because the SCO and ECO are using a county yield, and you're insuring on your farm level, you're insuring the farm yield. And so we have to think deeply about what is the relationship between that county yield and that farm yield. And pretty much guarantee you almost all times is going to be quite weak. Meaning that you can have all types of different outcomes. Your farm could have a great yield, the county doesn't, and you get a payment. The farm has a good yield, the county has a good yield, everything's good. But the scary one is when the farm does not have a good county yield and the county does. In that case, there would be no payments. So SCO, ECO are not intended to be used to substitute for farm yield risk. You will get a cheaper premium with the SCO, ECO, particularly the SCO. If you want to substitute your coverage level down and then buy SCO, it's going to cheapen things up. But you are moving away from your farm yield over to your county yield, and that's dangerous. So I'd rather see these things pulled far away, and I'd like to make it even bigger if I could, because they're two separate conversations, whether you want to think about buying SCO, ECO, and your farm level insurance. In a pooled risk environment, such as a drought, there probably is some type of relationship, and it still is likely weak. In the non-pooled risk, area, such as hail, wind, then this definitely weak, really strongly. So buyer beware, understand what you're after when you're buying SCO and ECO for yields. But where it does come in, though, that it's the same between farm and county, is in the price. So with the current projected price of $4.72, your ECO trigger, this is holding yields constant or just letting yields come along, you have a trigger $4.48. And I graph that down here. This is the current price probability distribution for December futures this fall. So we have December futures sitting around 472 here, and that's point A, and meaning that this is the range at which prices could end up down here on the bottom. There's a chance they can end up below $3, and there's a chance they could end up above 8, okay, albeit small. So when we figure out that trigger price of ECO of 484, we go up on point B and we go up to that point, hit that red line, the probability, we can see, or the price, the relationship between price and probability, we can see the probability of collecting on an ECO. And that is a 60% chance that prices will end up above that trigger, meaning there's a 40% chance that prices will be below. This is where we come to the first point of the essence of the decision making here. You're not buying these things to get a payment every year. You're buying it to protect yourself from rare events. For the SCO trigger price, you got to go down 86%, and you're sitting there, again, holding yields constant. You're sitting there just right above $4, and there is a 78% chance or thereabouts that the fall price will be greater than the SCO. All right, so there's your price protection on SCO and ECO in probability world. Both of them use the county yield, but what is the county yield? And it is not always what you think. And it is generally across the state different for irrigated and non-irrigated practice. But there are exceptions, even surprising to us. And you need to ask your agent about these things. So we have a few counties over here that are in yellow, and these are counties where there's one yield for both irrigated and non-irrigated. Last week I had a great discussion with an insurance expert who works for one of the companies of Fieldman, and we went back and forth. He thought he knew why, and by the time we got done discussing it and digging more into it, he figured out he didn't know why. And it is not due to acres. There's something else going on. Some of these counties have ample number of irrigated acres, and we can find counties that have separate yields for both irrigated and non-irrigated SCO that have substantially fewer acres, okay, in irrigated. So ask your agent. Also, when you ask your agent what those yields are in these counties, ask them or think about what that yield means. Is that a representative yield? And because that yield level is important. So both corn and soybeans have this same blending effect. Where it's really not blending, it's more like the irrigated went away and they put in non-irrigated. And that doesn't mean that in these counties you shouldn't buy SCO or ECO. All that simply means is if you're in one of these counties and you're buying it and you have irrigated production, you are essentially going to get a payment when there is a drought, and where because it's under non-irrigated. Where if you're in another county next to it and there's a drought and it has its own irrigated yield, you probably won't get a payment. So it's essentially increasing your payment opportunities, and it'll change your premiums as well. And the county mix between soybean and corn are actually different where they're blended. And this is a fairly new change, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more changes going forward. So please keep up with the parameters in the program. So wrapping up SCO, ECO appears to be a regional price protection strategy, and you bring along the uncertain yields for the ride. Again, it's not a good yield protection strategy because of the size of the county, how geographically spread out you are in the county, and a whole bunch of other factors. Jessica.
So we are going to start to tie in crop insurance and hedging together. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a background. And for those of you who maybe stayed on a little later, I guess that was 2 weeks ago during our last session, we did a little precursor on hedging, but I want to dig a little bit deeper here. I'm not going to take too much of your time, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page as we start to tie together how we make crop insurance decisions and how we make hedging decisions as a part of a comprehensive grain marketing strategy. So go ahead and move forward, Cory. So hedging is this process where we are going to protect ourselves from adverse movements in the market. And so you may have seen this quadrant used in grain marketing talks before. And basically what it says is based on our expectations of the futures price and the basis, we can select specific types of grain marketing contracts to protect against the risk that we think is going to happen. So if we think that the futures market is potentially going to decrease, you will see that one of the options, not the only option, but one of the options that we have to use, or one of the tools that we have to use, is short hedges. Now, we might combine that with a basis contract as well, depending on what we think the basis is going to do for our local elevator that we're selling grain to, or our local grain processor. So we're going to go through what hedging is and how to basically set up that short hedge. Now, you'll notice that there are other tools like a long hedge. However, a long hedge for a grain marketer is a speculative position. So we aren't going to be using that tool in today's discussion. We're really going to focus on that short hedge. Go ahead, Cory. So how do we determine whether we're a hedger or we're a speculator? And I think the first thing is we need to decide what our goals are. So when we talk to hedgers and they talk about why they are using certain marketing tools, they talk about wanting to break even. They talk about wanting to survive or to keep farming. They are producing grain to make money, and they're using these marketing tools to reduce their price risk. Now, if we talk to a speculator is somebody who is trading contracts, futures, and options solely to make money. So again, I want to focus on hedgers today, people who own grain, who are protecting themselves against that downside price risk. Go ahead and move forward. So again, a hedger is someone who buys and sells futures contracts to protect themselves from adverse movements in the cash price while meeting the objectives of positive expected profit. So we're trying to protect that opportunity for profit. Go ahead, Cory. Okay. So we're going to buy and sell these futures contracts, and we're going to take a position in the futures market that is opposite of the position held in the cash market. So if we are a grain producer and we are going to hedge, we are going to do something called being short in the market, which means that at some point in the future, we're going to have grain to sell. And so if we are worried about prices falling, we're going to protect against that by this short position. Go ahead and go forward. So I want to be very, very clear that we are going to short the market when we're concerned about a bear market or markets that are in decline. Go ahead, Cory. Okay, so there are 3 steps to hedging. The first step is the place, the second step is the lift, and the third step is the cash move. So I think you can click through these, Cory. I think it'll bring it up. Perfect. So to place a short hedge, and this is where folks get confused, is to place a short hedge, we're actually going to sell a futures market contract first to lift that hedge, we're going to buy it back. And then ultimately we have grain that we're going to sell in the cash market. Okay. So this is really important to understand that because this is a futures contract, I can sell first and then buy back. Okay. And the old adage of buy low and sell high still exists here. So we're going to sell at a high price, and then if our expectations come true, that market's going to drop, and then we're going to buy that contract back. And then of course we have to make the move in the cash market. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples here next. So here we go. Here's a farmer. They're going to place their hedge by selling at $4. They're going to lift that hedge and buy that contract back at $3.40. So from just those two actions, they made 60 cents. Now there are some fees that are associated with hedging. Here the example is 4 cents. It might be slightly different depending on who you're working with and what the prices are right now. But we're going to assume those fees accumulate to about 4 cents. Now I had grain, so I'm also going to then make my cash move and sell that grain. So ultimately, the actual cash price that I receive for the grain that I have is $3.56. So I made, after the fees, I'm at 56 cents because of my hedge. I make the cash move, giving me a final actual sale price for that grain of $3.56. So go
And
ahead.
in your example there, Jessica, the lift and the cash move happened nearly simultaneously.
Correct. Yeah, and we'll show that here. I think the next
Oh,
example shows
sorry.
you. Nope, you're okay. Oh, well, let's do some, we can do some math here for a second. Go ahead, forward. So we need to ask ourselves one more forward, Cory. So we need to ask ourselves, how are we thinking about each of these pieces? And this is probably the most math Cory and I are going to show you. We've talked about basis in this series before, so we're not going to spend too much time on that, as well as the cash price. But what we're looking at is what is the expected cash price of the hedge? And so we have to look at the futures plus the expected basis minus the fees. So when we place that hedge, we're kind of putting into our mind of where we expect to be with that expected cash price. And then the actual sale price is the cash price plus or minus the gain or the loss from the hedge, and we subtract out the fees there. So again, I'm going to show you a couple of real life examples and show you how we kind of shift between that futures market position and that cash market position. So go ahead, Cory.
I don't know if you have any more examples.
Oh, there should be some in there. Go one more.
Well,
No?
now we're in
Oh,
my sad, happy world.
oh, okay.
Uh,
So yeah, so we can go back. So as we talk about here in deciding when we lift that hedge on that math example, we're really lifting that hedge. We're lifting that hedge and we're making the sale in the cash market basically at the same time. So typically we like to say when you are content with the basis value, that's we're gonna lift the hedge and sell the cash. So I always think of it that you don't want to hedge grain you don't actually own, right? The definition of a hedger is pricing grain that we actually have control of. So if this grain is priced in the futures market, right, we want to make sure that we're not double dipping on it, for a lack of a better term, or double making sure that it's priced either in the futures market or priced in the cash market. So again, I'm not sure if that was completely clear. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll see if Cory has any additional comments there.
yeah, I think what you're saying is don't sell your grain and then go hedge it at the same time.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Okay, so
I'm
I'm gonna flip back over to you. Is that right, Cory?
Deal. Yeah, we're gonna keep talking about hedging for a little bit here. Get my cursor to work. All right. So in Jessica's example, she started off with a price when the hedge happened at $4, and then the final price ended up at 340, I believe, 60-cent gain. And this right here is you have the black line, the solid black line is the current December 2025 futures. And that range around it in the red there is all the possibilities of where the final price on December 1 could end up. And so there's a wide distribution around this. You cannot predict it. Anyone trying to predict it is not doing a good justice. You might as well just manage it because it's not predictable. And when you try to predict it, you start to get into this emotional world of being sad and happy. I made it very simple, this world, where effectively you hedged here. This is the solid black line, and you're hedging, you have gains. If you go over there on the happy side, you could go up, let's say to 2, you're $2 ahead on your hedges. Or you could be on the sad side where you're $2 behind on your hedges. This is not the approach to hedging. Hedging, the underlying function driving hedging decisions is doing something else. And what that is creating an average farm price. So you diversify your portfolio, you have some hedges, some pre-harvest hedges, and then you sell some grain at harvest, and you create an average farm price. And so we can model that. And what you have here is the red line is the average farm price of doing nothing, just waiting till harvest. And the blue line is hedging 40% of your guarantee or expected production, earlier in the year. Call it March 1 when the crop insurance projected price is known. So you sell 40% then, and you sell the other 60% at harvest. You create an average farm price that is higher than doing nothing. And the underlying factor driving that is seasonality. Seasonality allows you to do that because over time, the fall price has been lower than prices in the spring. And why is this important? Why should we pay attention to this? Because we can change the probabilities of our average farm price being below our production costs. Again, we can change the probabilities of the average farm price being below our production costs. So we can manage it, okay? Again, we're not winning or losing on our hedges. We're creating an average farm price, and we're trying to create an environment where we can guarantee that we will not be selling grain less than our production costs. You got kind of two general states of the world. You never go broke taking a profit. That's selling ahead. Or don't sell something you don't have. Okay, so you got both types. And years ago, this was really clear. But now it's pretty muddy with crop insurance. So every year we hear the marketing is important. It will be all around us in different magazines. Marketing services, who are of course selling marketing service, will tell you it's good. Bank loan officers will tell you it's good. Agricultural economists such as Jessica and I will tell you, hey, it's a great thing to do. However, that doesn't mean it works out every year. And so there's been roses and thorns felt. That's the happy sad. And of course, there's some really bad things that have happened in it, because suppose someone did a whole bunch of forward contracting, did not buy insurance, and had a really, really, really low yield, and prices went up. Okay, that's the absolute worst place you want to be. But we can make our life simpler to understand what does pre-harvest hedging and crop insurance, how do they work together? Does crop insurance change pre-harvest hedging? Yes. It doesn't require pre-harvest hedging. It just changes the probabilities of your final net income distribution, because you're changing the average farm price, and that then changes how much money you will make or lose at the end of the year. But with insurance, we've also got some kind of strange concepts floating around, and I want to talk about it a little bit. So there's statements floating around in the insurance world that says you can hedge up to your insured production. Well, I've spent time trying to find that, and I cannot find that. Can you hedge up to your insured production? Yes, you can. Are you changing your net income distribution way out there in the tail of really low bad things? Yes, you are. And I'm going to show you where that happens here in a little bit. And by the way, you can hedge anything, right? Any percent you want, just as long as you can back it up financially with whatever happens. But you need to understand where the dollars go and your dollar exposure to understand the role of hedging with insurance. Okay, so we need to look at it through the dollars. Okay, we're going to follow the dollars floating around, and we're going to follow one other rule to give us more essence of the role of decision making. We're not going to buy products or do things that could ultimately put us in a worse financial position than doing something else. No matter what we do, we are always going to put ourselves in a better financial position on the risk side. And you'll see some pictures of this here soon. So let's go through this. So the guarantee, that's your price times yield times your coverage level. Oftentimes you hear people focus on the yield times coverage level. That's your guaranteed production, but that is not actually what you get. The max farmer payment net from insurance is the guarantee minus the producer premium. Under all outcomes, you will pay the producer premium. So you could have a full loss, you'll get a guarantee check, you're still going to pay the premium. So your guarantee is not what you get at the end in all outcomes. It's the guarantee minus the premium. All right, so now we know that the max farmer payment they'd ever get, net payment, would be the guarantee minus producer premium. So if you hedge up to the guarantee, you've actually hedged past your max payment, which there seems to be some type of financial cliff that happens past that, but there's not. There's just a little bit change in the riskiness of doing this. When you start pre-harvest hedging, you start bringing in the probability of buyback fees. And you need to ask your elevator, if I don't perform on this, if I can't show up with the production, what happens? On one side, insurance will pick up the difference if prices go up from the spring to the fall. That's what the magic of the revenue protection policy. But it doesn't cover the fees. And some elevators may have high fees, some may have reasonable fees, some may have no fees. Okay, you have to find out what they have. But as you walk up the hedging ladder, you keep hedging more, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. Every 10 percentage points you go up, you're improving the chances of having buyback fees. And buyback fees imply less money for the farmer. So through all of this, what we've identified as the optimal long run hedging percent. This is in the spring. This is like in a couple weeks when you know absolutely nothing about the growing season, is around 40%. And for irrigated, it's higher than that. Because of course you take out the droughts. Now, that doesn't mean you should hedge up to 40% or do nothing or hedge up to 100. You can do all that. But if you're going to hedge a whole bunch, you need to really, like way more than 40%, you need to understand what could happen up there at prices and maybe take a different position in, say, the options market. Something to protect yourself if prices go on a run because of a drought. So there's ways to manage it. It's just a little bit more sophisticated. So let's take a look at what's going on with insurance and no insurance. Start there, then we're going to go into hedging. So in the case here, just buying an insurance product rearranges the low end of the distribution in dollars per acre. This is a different crop, but the idea still fits here. Is you'll get indemnities. And the indemnities insulate you from those financial outcomes that are really low down here that you would have been subject to before without insurance. So insurance protects your bottom end, and that's good. And it's a less risky position than otherwise. So you would, of course, be incentivized to want to buy insurance. But now let's say you do some hedging. So you bought insurance and you do some hedging. So we're going to hedge 25% with a 75% coverage level. And that's the blue line here. So you had the initial red line, it's the same one from the previous side. And now you hedge 25% up front, and you immediately see that hedging increases the chance of making money. It lowers your risk by shifting over. That blue line is to the right of the red line through all outcomes. So low levels of hedging are financially superior than doing nothing. But the only way you'll ever see all of this is if you go through a whole lot of years. So this is a theoretical representation of all possible outcomes. When you go through it in your farming career, you're only going to get 20, 30, 40 of these things. You're going to have some really good ones out here where you're going to want to get back to the happy sad of hedging, or you're going to experience one way down here in the low end that you said, man, I'm really glad I hedged. I'm better off than doing nothing. That implies that you go back and calculate what would have happened without having it and without having insurance. But let's suppose now you want to hedge up to your guarantee, which I've already motivated as maybe a precarious place to be. So in this case, when you hedge up to your guarantee, you now see down here on the risk side that the blue line actually crosses the red line, where there's probabilities now in hedging up to your guarantee that you could actually be worse off than just buying insurance and doing no hedging. That's the red line. Well, why is that? Well, that's because when there is a major event that really drops your yields really low, and you've hedged a whole bunch, you're going to have a lot of buyback fees in there, and those are going to be coming out of your cost function, thereby lowering your net income, and your net income then will be less than doing nothing. Okay? Less than doing nothing. You may never see this outcome through your whole career, but it's in your probability distribution that it could happen. All right. So in summary, today we talked about ECO, SCO. Please understand very well what they do and don't do. Think deeply about whether these policies fit into your goals and objectives, and perhaps use them strategically. Maybe think of it as another type of marketing tool like Jessica was talking about. For hedging, it's really defined now. We know it well. The tools are clear. They've been around, but in order to make decisions with hedging, we need a really solid framework. And building an average farm price is a solid framework. Comparing to harvest price, that's an emotional framework. We're not in the game to win or lose on little things. We're in the game here to create a solid farm price that improves our chances of farm survival. Hedging and insurance, I encourage you to follow the money flows. Evaluate different scenarios, especially low yield and or low price, and see what happens. But follow the money flows. Make sure you get the premiums in there and the buyback costs in there as well. So wrapping it up, we encourage you to think about what you're doing in your net income distribution, really on the low revenue side when you're buying these products. What are you doing? Okay. And SCO and ECO fall right into that. What happens to your low end of your net income distribution? Let's say from a hailstorm, what does SCO, ECO do for you? That's a fundamental question. You have to ask about that. If you're treating SCO, ECO as a hedging opportunity, as a marketing opportunity where you're almost like buying a put over a little range with this yield component, it'll just come along for the ride. Perhaps you're strategically engaging in hedging, and that's a fantastic thing, but know why you're doing it. Okay, know why you're doing it. And with that, let's open it up for questions.
All right, so I'm gonna make it to where you can unmute yourself to ask questions. So that is now turned on. You're welcome again to unmute yourself to ask Cory or I a question today, or you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. So we will pause here for just a second as we take a moment for folks to formulate questions. Cory, there's a good one in the chat there. Hedge to arrive. What does
Yeah,
hedge to arrive
fantastic.
mean?
Yeah, we discussed hedging in a general sense. So hedge to arrive is a contract created by elevators where they will do the hedge for you, and in return, you deliver that crop to them. And so that's a nice win-win where you don't have to start your own hedging account and maybe pay margin calls. They'll do that for you, and in return, they get to know that those bushels are coming to them.
So the way I like to think about it is it's the opposite of a basis contract. So instead, I'm setting my futures price with the elevator, and then later in the contract, I will eventually set the basis. So it's again one of those contract options that's available with your local grain buyer, or your local grain processor. The other thing that's nice about hedge to arrives, depending on the definition of the contract, is usually it can be in a smaller unit than a traditional hedge. So if I'm going to the futures market and I'm hedging or I'm contracting 5,000 bushels at a time. Sometimes your elevator, if you're working directly with them, or your grain processor, whoever that might be, will allow you to do a hedge to arrive contract for a smaller amount, like 1,000 bushels, rather than 5,000 bushels. So that can be a really great benefit of a hedge to arrive contract. The other piece about that is remember that there are lots of different types of contracts that you can use directly with your local elevator. So if you're not ready to fully step up into the hedging game yourself, go to your local elevator, tell them what you're concerned about, and have them explain the types of contracts that they have available that might be able to assist you in protecting the kinds of things you're concerned about. So if you're concerned about the basis dropping, or if you're concerned about the futures price dropping, they can help you set up different types of contracts to protect whatever type of risk you are most concerned about. So great question.
I think they're still pretty popular too. I'd also encourage you go ask your elevator about those and how they'll be willing to roll forward, maybe do a storage contract, what sort of options you have, exactly what's the fee. Each elevator will have a different fee with that. I've seen those range from anywhere from 0 on up. So yeah, ask your elevator what the fee is, and again, remember you're creating an average farm price, not winning or losing in the hedging game.
Cory, I think that brings up a really good point, is that, when we've decided kind of what percentage we're comfortable with hedging, that's not to say that we're not probably going to go out and hedge all of that percentage. So if I decide, maybe 25% of my expected production is where I'm comfortable, I'm probably not going to go out and hedge that in a single contract or on a single day. I'm going to build that around it. So I might use a hedge. I might use an HTA, I might use some cash forward contracts, but I'm going to make sure that, especially early in the season, that I'm leaving myself some flexibility depending on what the market's doing. I'm really going to be thoughtful about how much I'm contracting essentially at once, because we know that the market can change and does change and will change. And so I'm thinking about, that's kind of happening in steps and not necessarily, I'm going to hedge 25% today. Throughout the growing season, I'm probably thinking more about what that percentage is and making sure that I've got that built through the seasonality, through the highest, through the period that has the highest expectation of prices or probability for prices to be highest is where I'm going to build, that total percentage of what I'm going to hedge.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yes, we do not want to be flow and bundle everything in one day. We want to space that thing out, and in our modeling, we have not been able to beat good old Terry Timer, who just sells 5% each week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever that is, just through the end of June there, and that's one of Ed Ussett's players, and his grain marketing simple. It's just not easy, because Terry Timer gets the beauty of, he just is going to take the price, which is just a reflection of opinion of active buyers and sellers at just random points in time, and that person seems to be winning over time, in the long run than anyone else. Which the cool thing about Terry Timer is he is zero emotion in this. Literally none. He knows that those trades are going to happen, and they happen pretty much no matter what. And where the choice is how much will you hedge in that pre-harvest window during the seasonality, which I believe we will be talking about in 2 weeks.
Okay, I'm going to offer one more time. If there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put those in the chat. While we're doing that, I'm also going to launch a poll. Cory and I would like to hear from you about today's session and what we should be doing in future sessions. So if you don't mind going ahead and completing that poll, we would greatly appreciate that. And again, we're hanging on here for any final questions.
Talking about hedging reminded me of hedging this in 2024 worked out pretty well. But hedging in the previous 2 years worked out, there's more sad than happy, obviously a lot more sad. And because of the sad of the 3 years ago and 2 years ago, it caused a lot of different choices last year. And that's where it cost the money. Because last year the hedging outcome was completely different. And if you view it through an average farm price, you rid yourself of those emotions. Generally, you still go through them, but you have to remember your goals and objectives and stick to that.
Well, Cory, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Any final thoughts for today?
Yeah, the final one reminded me of obviously I've met a lot of producers that have sold nothing, but I've actually also met producers that have sold 100% of 2025 crop already, but they are very well versed on what other options they have over on the options market side, on the pricing side, if things start to move around. Okay, so there's not one way to do this. There's a variety of ways, and whatever way you choose should be anchored strongly to your goals and objectives and your financial condition.
Great way to close it out. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, our final session will be in 2 weeks. We will be discussing seasonality, which I always enjoy because I think it's very interesting to see when markets and how markets move. So we encourage you to joining us in 2 weeks for the seasonality session as we wrap up our grain marketing for 2025 series. Thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.